it's a natural act of imperfect act. And in fact, is it really, really such a crime? In events such as these, when our answers proceeded to riddle, 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 riddle in a rhyme. It's a riddle in a rhyme. All through the obstacles around, it's truly only freedom that surrounds. With every breath, a living voice. With every rest, yes, there is a choice. And to see what you want to see, for it to be there must surely be mountains to climb, cliffs to scale, bridges to build, and we will persevere. And we will persevere. And we will persevere. Of imperfect act, and in fact, is it really, really such a crime? In events such as these, when our answers proceeded to riddle, 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 riddle in a rhyme. It's a riddle in a rhyme. It's a riddle in a, it's a riddle in a. It's a riddle in a, 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 it's a riddle in a rhyme.
Hey guys, welcome to the Dave Darren Show. Today is going to be a really interesting show. It's very different than my normal topics. However, I think we're going to delve into a little bit about the paranormal. So we're going to get into that too. But right now we have, let me announce, Christine, author, medium, which is interesting as well, and a broadcaster like I am a broadcaster right now. So let's welcome Christine to the show. Christine, how are you today?
Good. It's night time in London, so a little bit sleepy, but it's lovely to be on and talking to Americans. I love America, and I like the people, the accents. You all sound very glamorous.
Well, great. Well, in honor of having a UK guest, I mentioned to you earlier when we were doing a little test of the software, I'm drinking tea in honor of having someone on from the UK. So let me take a sip of tea to warm up because believe it or not, in Phoenix today, it's a little bit chilly. So I actually needed tea today. So a little sip of tea.
Tea is lovely, plenty of sugar.
But you put cream. See now, Americans we don't put cream in tea. At least I don't. And that's a funny thing. I don't like. Well, I don't put cream in coffee either. But putting cream in tea seems to off the taste a bit. And I know you guys are used to it. Always cream in your tea.
No, no, just milk and sugar. Cream, it's sort of quite expensive, so no, not all the time. I like cream in hot chocolate though.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so it's great to have you on the show. So, you know how I met you. I remember I was on Facebook and I was making commentary, I think, about how complicated it is to be a broadcaster and what I do now, the podcaster thing that I do. And you were telling me about how tough it is to be an author. And that's how I think we met each other. So, tell me a little bit about that. You've been an author for how long? Have you been writing for a lot of years? Have you been on, are you on bookshelves? Are you on Amazon.com? How do people hook up with you as an author? And tell me some of the challenges as well.
Well, I first published in 2000. God, when did 2008? I published my first book, and I'd been writing it for quite some time, and it was a biography because I'd met this serial killer, a famous English serial killer, when I was 23. Ian Brady, the Moors murderer, and I wanted to write a book about him, but I ended up writing a book about me and then meeting him, and then I tried to get an agent, and the agent said, oh, that would make a good memoir. So she set me up a meeting with Hodder and Stoughton. They gave me an advance, and I published then in 2008. I was lucky enough that it became a bestseller in the Sunday Times charts. It went in at number 15, came out. It was in the shops, it was hardback, and then it went to paperback. And I was lucky that the News of the World, I'd been a journalist for the News of the World for quite some time, and they gave it a 5-star review, and they said it was reminiscent of The Silence of the Lambs. And so that was quite exciting for me. And then when after that, I was interested in writing a book about an American serial killer, which I'd seen movies about the Hillside Strangler, and I found them hard to watch actually, Angelo Bono and Kenneth Bianchi, and they were very violent, and so I wasn't really interested in the Hillside Strangling, but then I saw it was a documentary about Kenneth Bianchi, and he was being a different person, like he was being his murderous self, which was called Steve. And so I tuned in, and then I noticed when the camera switched to him in court, he was like really, really different. And I thought that's odd and interesting because the first serial killer, Ian Brady, that I'd met and got to know, he had alter personality. So as an investigative journalist, I thought, well, I want to investigate that. So I tried to write to Bianchi, and I remember a friend of mine said, oh, he won't reply to you. And I got a reply quite quickly, and then quite quickly I got an invite to go and fly out to Walla Walla in America to interview him. So I went out there, interviewed him for 2 days, spent 16 hours in all sitting with him, and I wrote In for the Kill, which was supposed to be all about Bianchi, but the publisher added in a bit of Brady, so that went out, and it was quite interesting. It was only when I was on a Facebook group with Fritz Springmeier because I was interested in the Greys. I'd always had a lot of dreams about the Greys, and there was a girl on there who'd studied mind control, and of course Fritz Springmeier's written books about mind control, and she'd read my second book, and she said, oh, I think you've been in a Monarch program, the Monarch butterfly kind of stuff. Because when I was a journalist, I'd done a lot of spying on the IRA, and I got close to them and close to serial killers, and I seemed to be very good at getting close to different people. And she said she thought I was one of these Monarch butterflies, like, a mind-controlled slave. So I thought that was quite interesting that she'd read my book and come up with that. So I then started to research this Monarch stuff, and I came into contact with Douglas Dietrich, who does a. Have you heard of him, Douglas Dietrich?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, everyone knows. She's passed away long. She lived a long life, right? Didn't she die like at the
Oh
age of
no,
90?
no. Douglas Dietrich. He does a radio show. The
Oh,
American.
no, I'm thinking of Marlena Dietrich, the actress.
Oh no,
Yeah, okay.
he's kind of a little bit like you, and he does stuff on the paranormal. And so he knew a lot about this MK Ultra and monarch mind control. So I went on his
Oh,
show to
right.
talk to him, and he told me that this guy called Colonel Michael Aquino had done a lot of stuff, and he'd invented this mind control program. And so I tried to interview him with a view to doing a book, and I had this really weird encounter, which was like I was trying to get to sleep one night, and all of a sudden I saw this white rabbit in front of like my, the mind's eye, and
Yeah, a little bit.
yeah, like okay, when you use your imagination, you use your mind's eye, right? Your like if I tell you now to think of your mother's face, you could bring it up, right?
Right, I could. And in fact, by the way, on a week from this Thursday, we're going to do a show about people using their minds to try to control the various parts of maybe their perception, or even maybe they'll move stuff around. Or so we're going to do a show on that. Ironically, a week from this Thursday, so you may want to join that show and participate if you can. It'll be a East Coast time zone of 9 o'clock at night, so that's not going to work for you time wise. But maybe you can participate if you wanted to. But that's really fascinating. So let me ask you this question: when you were interviewing this serial killer, was there any fear at all? Obviously, were you interviewing them behind bars, and you were on one side of the bar, they were on the other side of the bar? Were you in jail with them? How do you interview someone like that without being a little bit fearful of your life? Because if they're a serial killer, they've killed multiple people, not just one, because one is not a serial. You got to kill multiple people to be a serial killer. That's kind of frightening. I would think you'd be scared of that.
Well, the first one, Ian Brady, I wasn't scared of because he was kind of quite skinny, quite sly, and he was very, very drugged up.
Uh-huh.
And then after I'd visited him on the first occasion, he wrote to me and said that his visits were unsupervised. So when I went back, it was about 10 years after that. His visits were unsupervised, and he grabbed me and tried to kiss me, which was really quite freaky and horrible. Which I don't think that. I mean, when I tell that story to Americans, they're like, "Oh, we don't allow our serial killers to be alone with people." But Brady had been classified as mad, and so he got put in a mental asylum, which is different from a prison. And then
Wow.
the doctors there had judged that he was okay to have visits with people by himself. So I was in a room with him by myself that had a kind of glass hole in the door, and he was checked on. And of course, he had the liquid cosh, so he was pretty, dumbed down. But it was still a bit scary. But it
Yeah.
wasn't as scary as going to see Bianchi. Now, when I went to America to see Bianchi, that of course was a prison. And of course, when you go in, there was about 20 guards in the room, and the guards had guns. They were tooled up,
Yeah.
there's plenty of silverware. But when I was sitting with him, and there was a desk with guards, and it was like more or less a few feet away. So I was sitting in a table. He was sitting to my side, so our knees were like touching. And it was during sitting with him that I kind of just saw a glimpse of the killer, the torture, and it was almost like being with, like, one of those Nazis, in the,
Hmm.
not that I've ever met a Nazi, but how I would imagine it would feel. And I just felt like a feeling, like a real chill of negativity, like I felt a coldness go through me, and I really felt absolutely terrified. It was almost like I was going to be eaten, and I felt an urge to kind of to kind of run, but
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
body froze.
Well,
And it was
now,
just,
yeah. Let me ask you this, because if I was there interviewing someone, now I'm used to Americans. We have a different lifestyle here than I think the UK, where supposedly we're a little bit more on the violent. Would you say Americans, from your perspective of living in the UK, are violent serial killers? Would you consider them to be more dangerous than the UK serial killers? Would you say that we're a little bit more out of hand than the UK typically?
yeah,
Well, okay, we
yes,
are.
I think it's the real deal. To
Yeah.
be honest, I don't think we have serial killers. Yes, we have people that do it one after the other, but in a way, they're kind of like different from the
Yeah.
American serial killers that seem to be the real deal, so to speak, you know?
Yeah. So what I'm getting at is when you're asking questions in the UK of these serial killers, you may be able to ask any single question because you realize that they're not, like you just said, they're not really, really serial killers. You come to the United States and you meet some of these hardened criminals. They spent their entire lives in jail. They worked up to being the proud accomplishment of being a serial killer at that point. So when you're there asking questions and you're there, even though there's 20 guards around, I would think that you may be hesitant to ask them that question is going to make them hit that maximum adrenaline pump of hostility where they're going to come at you, 20 guards or not. They're going to try to grab you in hopes that and you're probably hoping that the guards can stop them before they grab you. But I would imagine your questions might not be as energized with really getting to the bottom line of them, that, or maybe not. Maybe you were as fully outgoing with them as you would be with any other guest and just take the risk.
Well, with him, I mean, he did get to a point where he asked me about another writer that I know, an English writer called Chris Berry D, who'd written books about him. And he said to me, because he knew I knew Chris Berry D and I'd met Chris and, you know, we knew each other, and he hated Chris. He said he lied about him in a book, but he said I confess in this. And he said to me, I'd hate it if you were there just for him. He said, I'd take somebody down like that. Do you know what I mean by take somebody down?
Sure. Yeah.
And I said, yeah. And he was kind of playing the tough guy, but it was odd that I didn't feel. But then I've sat with real irate guys in Dundalk and, you know, in pubs and where you could get beaten up. So I knew I had the guards there. And so when he was coming on like a hard man, I didn't feel afraid because I thought, you're not going to beat me up. The guard will get there quicker. You'll probably get sanctioned. So I thought, he's not going to beat me up. But it was odd. It was when he relaxed into being himself. And suddenly I looked in his eyes and I thought, you're the one that injected bleach into those girls. You're the one that gassed them. You're the one that tortured them and just threw them naked, you know, on the streets of Los Angeles. And I felt that. I felt the reality of who he was. And it was a weird feeling. It was like the feeling of that you're not the top of the food chain. And I had the same experience once when I was feeding a lion at the zoo. And just, you know, I got in and the lion guy let me sort of come in because I was a journalist. And so I met this lion quite close up. There was just a thin barbed wire. And the lion went crazy. And I was like, oh, God. Let me out. Okay. And it's kind of the same feeling. It's kind of like a primal terror, really, of
Wow. Well, you know, it's funny. Some of my audience thinks, Dave, you live an exciting life. However, look at you. You're meeting serial killers and a lion with a little thin barbed wire between you and the lion. And people think I live an exciting life. Look at you. So let me say hello to some of the guests here. We got Terry joined. We got Richard joined. We got Brigda joined. Let's see, we got Jeff to join and Dynamo Hum. I don't know this person. So good to see this person as well. Good to see Gary. So a lot of people have joined. So let me ask you this question. From a journalist perspective, when you're writing about this, so you obviously wrote about these killers, correct?
Yeah, I wrote a lot about Bianchi and a lot about the interchange, and then I've written a novel which features him, where I've kind of explored more the relationship between me and he, because I knew him over a period of 3 years, and you know, I thought it was interesting how he affected me as well, you know, because he likes to get inside my head, and one of his letters one time made me feel so spun. He actually attacked every part of me, and he said, this is one personality, this is a part of you, and that's not really real at all, and this is this part of you, and that's not real, and there's this part, and that's completely fake.
Wow.
and I was reading it, and I actually felt like quite unwell, and then for a whole week I barely knew who I was. He really just spun me. I mean, he studied psychiatry, and he's got a law degree since he's been in prison, and he seemed to find it easy to get inside my head and really sort of screw with it, you know. So in that kind of way, it was quite interesting. So I wrote the novel where I could really express that on paper. But it's quite interesting. Nobody, well, I can't find a literary agent for it because basically most of the UK literary agents, they want you to speak in a fancy way, and it's all about literary value, and so they're not really interested in, the meat of the matter, and
Yeah. Well,
yeah, they're
well,
not.
yeah.
And you've got
Yeah.
a name. Sorry.
Let me ask you this because I'm really curious about this before I forget this question. But for instance, I knew somebody in Wilmington, Delaware, actually, and she had a situation going on with an ex-boyfriend, and the ex-boyfriend actually burnt down her house. And now
No.
everyone got out of the house, the mother, the father, and she got out of the house without being burnt or killed, but their property was significantly damaged. Now, for that type of crime, you serve a time in jail. I think she said that the guy served 10 years in jail, but after 10 years, the guy's getting out. And I remember how petrified she was that he's getting out of jail. Now, you're writing books about, now I'm imagining the serial killers, they're not going to get out of jail anytime soon, but is there any fear in your mind that maybe they know somebody who is connected to them, they're friends with them in jail, they know that that friend of theirs in jail is getting out before them as the serial killer, they've met you, they talk to you, they know you're writing books and materials about them. Is there any fear at all that you're going to have repercussions for writing material about them, and maybe you're going to get some of the facts not exactly right, or you're going to portray them in a way that they don't like, or they're going to perceive it incorrectly and try to seek revenge on you? Is there any fear of that in your mind?
Well, I didn't have the fear until I finished In for the Kill, and then I started to get a feeling that someone was watching me around the
Yes,
house.
right?
It was like just as I went to the fridge, I'd open it, and it's almost like I would look behind because I would feel there was someone there. And I got it an awful lot, kept thinking there was someone looking at me through the window, a feeling of being watched. And then I started to get really weird hallucinations of
Huh.
scenes of violence, like really bloody scenes. And I thought, what the hell is going on? And they went on for quite a while, and well, a few days, but that was bad enough. Just
Yeah.
really horrific scenes. And I went to a priest and I said, I'm getting really horrific scenes. I don't know if it was connected to this serial killer who I went to see, blah, blah, blah. Because he had written a lot of occult stuff. He was very into the occult. And he'd said things like, oh, a prison can't keep me. And I'd read his short stories. He gave them to me, actually. I still have them. And they were all about the occult, about astral journeying and all this. And I didn't really think much of it. But the priest told me, he gave me various prayers, and I started praying really, really hard. But I had to pray really hard to actually get rid of these images that I was seeing. And I thought, this has really been a sort of unhappy experience. And I contacted Chris Berry D, who I hadn't spoke to in a while. We kind of competed over Bianchi, and it was like, I'm going to get closer to him than you. And there was a whole lot of competing between me and Chris. So we'd fallen out a little bit. But I rang him and I said, Chris, I need to ask you something about Bianchi. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to lead him. I just really want to know the answer. And I said to him, did you notice anything spooky when you were dealing with Bianchi? And he said, you mean he can project himself to your house
Wow.
and inside your head? And I went,
Yes.
holy shit, holy shit. I said, you're kidding. He said, I warned you. I said, no, you didn't warn me. He said, I absolutely warned you. I told you he will get inside your head. There's something inhuman in him that will project himself inside your head and haunt you. I said, you didn't say that to me. He said, I did, and you just didn't listen. And he was right. I just thought, oh, yeah, sure. You're trying to scare me. I'm the girl. You're the man. I'm the scared little girl who's going to see him. But he was absolutely right. I mean, it was absolutely horrifying. I ended up writing to Bianchi again, apologizing for writing a book about him and saying, please leave me alone. I'd appreciate you didn't do that. And it stopped after a while, actually. But bad things started to happen to me. I started to get really loads and loads of bad luck. And I started to think, how much into Satanism is he? How much linked was Satanism with his actual crimes, that he has these abilities,
Yeah, let me ask you this. Now, you're a medium, because I was looking at your web, and obviously you're an author. We talked about that. You're a medium, so we're talking about this serial killer. And obviously, he was able to manipulate you based upon getting in your mind, just because he's that kind of an individual that can probe the intelligence of you and get in that intelligence of you and get into your mind, whether it was that or some kind of Satanism or paranormal stuff connected to you. But what's a medium? And do you think that you being a medium opened you up to that, for him to enable that part of you and get into your being that way? What's a medium? Tell me what that is.
Yeah, well, I had been, psychic since I was a child. I grew up in a Catholic orphanage run by Jesuits, and I was adopted at age 5 by a kind of military family, and they had a nun who overtook most of my, upbringing. And I had an unusual upbringing in that my adoptive father, was sexually abusive to me. My mother was violent. And then when I was 13, after they'd finished abusing me in every possible way, I went back into care. They put me back into care. And I went from care to working for a detective agency. Now, I only did that because I'd screwed up my exams. There was nowhere else I could go. And somebody said, oh, there's this vacancy here for girls, like, you can come along. So I started to do that, and I started to realize that I was very good at that because of this psychic thing I had as a child. And so, although I didn't tell the people I was working for that I was using it, I was very sharp. I had a strong sixth sense, and I knew what to say to people to get them to open up, and I knew who to ask certain questions to. So I didn't go along to people I was working for and say, oh, I'm going to use a Ouija board or anything like that. It was the fact I was just quite sharp, and it was only around that time that I became interested in the first serial killer, because I looked at his picture and I remember thinking, I don't believe that you did it off your own back. So me investigating serial killer number 1 was about my psychic feeling that he didn't actually do it. And that made me quite unpopular with the English, because they like to hate him. They like to say, oh, he's really evil, or, we've captured evil. But actually, they just captured a shell of a mental patient. I don't believe that when I met Ian Brady that I was looking into the eyes of a serial killer. I really don't. And he did have alters, but I don't believe the actual thing that did the murders was actually there. Now, with Bianchi, although I went along, I went from being a private investigator to a journalist, and I sort of wrote as well. And when I met Bianchi, I really wanted to see what was it that did the murders. Was it him, or was it something that came through him? Was it something otherworldly? And it's quite interesting because I spent 3 years banging down his door, 3 years getting close to him through letters, like 20-page letters, and this is like twice a week for 3 years. And I got to the end of him for the kill, and I thought to myself, what's my conclusions here after all this hard work? And it was hard work, because now and again Bianchi would say to me, go away, I don't want to speak to you. And I had to say to him that I was helping him with his autobiography, to get close to him, and there was all this back and fro, and he used to regularly say, don't want to write to you, get lost, go away. And so he was a very tough nut to crack, and I really did sweat over the computer, because I thought, I want to capture him, and I want to say in the book, this is otherworldly beings, or this is this, and I really want to find out. And then when I came to the end of the book, I thought, what's my conclusions? And my conclusions were that it was actually human, that it was something in him, that the evil is born of woman. It's not, it wasn't something coming from somewhere else. It was actually all him. But it's interesting, since then, and I came across this monarch mind control, people of Americans mainly, because they're more advanced when it comes to this kind of thing than the English. They say about these programs, like these school shooters who, they say they're actually controlled to do it by the deep state. Well, I think actually, people like Bianchi and Brady are experiments that have gone wrong. They are people that have been in care, they've been in board stalls, and they do have these alters. And I think perhaps they have been experimented on, because, these, with Bianchi, I mean, he has got a part of him that's very, very psychic, and it was that part. and it is like demonic, but it's definitely him. So I think another book writing about the fact that are these serial killers that we think serial killers, are they actually people that were trained to be things like shooters and that have sort of gone renegade, or maybe the deep state want them out there to terrify us, to make us think, oh, there's the boogeyman and there's evil, rather than looking at the state and thinking, well, it's the state that's evil. Now we can think, oh, what's evil? Oh, I know serial killers.
Yeah.
It's like we think we've got evil nailed down, but actually, what is real evil?
Wow. Now let me. By the way, Terry here asked. You said, "What's the name of the book?" It's called "In for the Kill." Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's Terry's question. Ren here asked. She says, "Is she saying he was possessed?" Now I think you're not quite sure, right? Because you said that you felt like all of his murdering came from deep inside of him, but you said he still could have been controlled somehow. So I guess.
Yeah,
Right?
I think it was an alter. I think after I'd written the book, then obviously this American had stepped forward and said, "Do I know about MK Ultra and monarch mind control?" And since then, I've studied it, and it's all about satanic ritual abuse. And what Russ Dizdar has done a brilliant series on it called Chosen Ones. And what they do, they abuse the child. They honeycomb their mind into different sort of parts, and they get one part and they attach a demonic entity and they program that part, and they can program it into being a killer. And they've used Mengele. I think the Nazis used this in Project Paperclip. They came over, and I think Stranger Things might have been based on it as well. So they got the Nazis, and they've been experimenting in this mind control where they use these children, torture them, and they got the best of the Nazis in Operation Paperclip, brought them back to America, and they still had all these mind control things. And Mengele was one of the people that invented this program. And it was interesting because when I met serial killer number one in the UK, Brady, there was something about, like, he had an altar that was like a Nazi, that was like Mengele. And then when I met serial killer number two, he also had this altar, and it's like he had the scent of a old Nazi, and it was like same thing. And then when somebody told me that these mind control programs had been actually put together by Mengele, I said to the person, Fritz Springmeier, "Do you think Mengele inserted himself into the program?" And he goes, "Yes, he did insert himself into the program." So it's quite interesting. Maybe I was looking into the eyes of Mengele inside Bianchi.
What's the name of that? What's it called? Ultra? What's it called again?
It's called MK Ultra. I'm sure your listeners have heard of it. And Monarch Mind Control.
Actually, a long time ago, when I was doing the music show, I actually did a one-off interview with someone that was talking about MK Ultra. So I never really did get deeply into it to understand what it was. But it's a mind control. Did it start in the United States or did it start in England? I think it started here, right? In the U.S.
Yeah, because what they did was a thing called Operation Paperclip, and they got all the Nazis and they got all their what they'd been doing. Of course, they studied the occult very deeply with the real programs and the Thor and all that, and the bell, the Nazi bell, and all that kind of thing. And they got all the research and brought it back to America. So you guys, well, I'm sure we were involved in all that as well. Such evil goes on here. Like at the Tavistock, they do, that kind of experimentation. And, so it wasn't just the Americans, but, and I think that probably the deep state has, experimented on people. I mean, I don't know, sometimes when I see those shooters, I think that they're definitely MK'd. I think, well, the Las Vegas shooting, that was weird. But they say that, I thought at first that was a MK shooting. I even did a radio show saying it was an MK shooting. However, then we look into it, and they say it was a kind of set-up thing with ISIS, and ISIS let rip onto the crowd, which seems more likely, doesn't it?
Yeah. By the way, what does MK stand for? I thought it was mind control, but control is obviously a C. What does the letters MK stand for?
Yeah, it's control spelled with a K, like the Germans.
Oh, okay, there we go. So it is mind control, but starting with a K like the German way. Someone mentioned here, let me just go back to some of the questions before the questions scroll up. We had Dynamo Hum asked about Max Spears. Now I have no idea who that is, so maybe you do, or maybe you can tell us about it.
Yeah, he was a guy who I met when I started researching into the mind control. I came across James Casbolt firstly, and interestingly, Casbolt said that he used to be a Nazi, and it's weird because and interestingly, and I could barely believe it, Casbolt grew up he spent some time in a Jesuit-run orphanage, the same as me. And of course, he grew up in Britain and the UK. And he had said he had recalled being a Nazi in a previous life. And it was weird because when I was listening to Casbolt, I was having like really strong dreams of being a Nazi and visions of a past life as a Nazi as well. So I was desperate to get hold of James Casbolt and talk to him and meet him. But I just missed him, just by a fraction. He got put into prison just when I came on the scene. And then I was left with Max Spears again, who had said he'd gone through these programs, and they call it super soldiers, but I prefer to say monarch slavery, because the monarch butterfly and these people are programmed like the monarch. And so I got to know Max. I met Max near me, at a place near me, and we got on quite well. I was just getting to know him really, really well when I think he was murdered. A lot of people say, no, he just took a drug overdose, but it was weird. He was kind of blossoming, he was appearing on mainstream TV. Over here, he was talking about the reptilians, and he was gathering fame. He was really charismatic, and it just seemed strange that suddenly, he was rising. He was a rising star, almost like David Icke, and then suddenly he goes back to Poland, and he's dead, and he had a girlfriend at the time, Monica, and she rang me on the Sunday and said, "Oh, he'd vomited black fluid, and I'm really sorry." She kept saying, "Sorry, I'm sorry." So I wondered, did she give him too much drugs? He was addicted to, I think, painkillers, and I think maybe she'd got him some stuff that was bad and given him too much, and but that can be like spiritual targeting, like because we're quite controlled by the other side. So that could have been a kind of, he's exposing stuff. So all of a sudden he's off the scene. I was quite upset about that. I mean, it's quite interesting that Max Spears is dead and James Casbolt is in prison, and he's been in prison now for about 6 years. I mean, yes, he did try and blackmail his wife's family, but that it was his wife, so it has to be taken into account. Even though, yes, he did the revenge porn, that's terrible, but 6 years when it's non-violent, that's not usual in the UK. It's not usual. So it's like these two guys have spoken out about the Monarch program, about MK, and suddenly they're wiped. I mean, I wrote to Casbolt in prison, and his mind is gone. I don't want to be mean about him and say, his mind's gone. I'm not slagging him off, but he's destroyed. He might as well be dead.
Yeah. Let me read some of the comments here. Jeff makes a mention here. He says, evil is very flexible and applicable to the human mind. Evil is easier to accept and harder to get away from. So that's interesting. That's a comment that Jeff had made.
I think that's very true.
Yeah. Let me ask you that. Let me say I got another one here from Dynamo. Let me read it live. I didn't pre-read it, but also I would like to know if she has any info on underground bases in the UK, specifically, what's it called? Please Move, etc. You familiar with that?
Peasmore. Yes. Well, James Casbolt spoke about Peasmore base.
Peasmore. I'm sorry, not Pleasemore. Okay, there we go. Thanks for. I don't have my glasses on to have read that properly, but yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but go ahead.
Oh, don't worry. It's a military basis. Yeah. Casbolt shared a lot about Peasmore, and another girl who I was friends with shared a lot about the Greys being underground. Wouldn't surprise me if the British were dealing with the Greys. I mean, I had a lot of nightmares about the Greys, and when I tried to investigate that Michael Aquino, again, I I had the experience of being pulled out of my body and taken somewhere where he interrogated me, and then all of a sudden Grace turned up. So there's a lot of activity like that here in the UK, for sure. Whatever the Greys are, and they certainly, whether they're a military construct, I don't know, but there's certainly activity with the Greys in the Well, I'm sure you have it over there as well.
Yeah, yeah. Let me ask you this before you get off that topic, and I'm sure you won't because it's a topic I want to delve into because obviously I do a show about paranormal and UFOs. Do you think that some of the mind control, we're talking about MK Ultra and we're talking about all this stuff. MK Ultra sounds like a beer, by the way, but MK Ultra. So do you think that some of this has been intensified with the capabilities given to us by UFOs and the Greys so that we can actually penetrate the mind deeper because we're experimenting with UFOs, so their capabilities are being projected onto certain individuals so that mind control becomes more powerful at this point based upon extraterrestrial giving us a means to do it more professionally. Is that possible?
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, looking into the murders of Brady and Bianchi, there was a lot of, you know, wounding going onto the body, which I think there was blood drinking at the scene. Of course, you didn't find the bodies till later, but there was a lot of that kind of activity. So I think, if there's reptilians involved in that kind of thing, they like to drink. They like to drink human blood. They like to feed off of torture. When individuals are tortured, they like to feed off that as loosh. And so, yeah, you can kind of think maybe there is. People automatically think, oh, it's demonic, demonic, demonic. But, after looking into it, what does demon mean? That actually, mean, oh God, I forget what it means, but I'm not sure there's any such thing. I think these are these beings, whatever they are. I mean, but I don't really think they're actually aliens. I mean, I just think they're a different race and they're an intra-dimensional race. And I think that people here, the rulers of the world, have had interactions with them. They do kind of, they get information. I think they give things back, and I think these beings do need to feed. And I think they take the peasants among us, basically the working class of both countries, and they kind of feed off them. They feed off us. They feed off the lower rungs, the low-hanging fruit, and they don't really see us as human. We're lower caste, and I think they throw us them as food. And I know they do that in certain films, and Netflix and, stuff like that. But I do think, and I do think these beings sometimes use us as taxis and jump into people. And I think that's happening more and more. I think, they get the kids in school, they kind of take out their heart chakra, they make them into, they hollow them out. So the soul leaves because it's traumatized, it hates life because life is so grey here. And basically they kind of leave, and then their body is free for anything to jump in. And I think these beings have a free run. So I do think, yeah, it's affecting us, and probably the higher people that are enjoying this world more than the rest of us are probably having a whale of a time and probably having more technology, better experiences, perhaps body hopping to prolong their life, while the rest of us, I think, are probably just used as loosh and probably used for all sorts of things. It's horrible to think about it, and lots of children go missing all the time.
Wow. By the way, anyone that wants to call, because I'm having a hard time reading all the chats here because there's sort of quite a few of them, so it's hard to keep track of all them. So if you want to call up and talk to my guest, make sure you call up 480-236-2111, and we'll put you on with Christine, and you can ask your question in person directly with her. Let me ask you, you mentioned it, we talked about the Greys, and I didn't even think we were going to talk about this, so this is getting more and more interesting as each of the dialogue goes by. And the reptilians, I think you mentioned it, you believe that they are probably, instead of being extraterrestrial, you think that they might be interdimensional races of people. Is that what you said? Did I catch that correctly?
Yeah, for sure, because anybody that's had abductions, I mean, I've had abductions myself, but I didn't think mine were proper. compared to others, because mine were like, I felt myself being pulled out of my body, always through the feet, and then used to find myself somewhere where my consciousness couldn't get back to my body. So I'd be trying, and it's also called astral detention, but I was trying to get back to my body and couldn't. So it's almost like you lose, it's like watching the telly, but you lose the remote, and someone else has got the remote. So you have to watch what they want to watch. And it's like your mind is kind of throwing up things that you don't want to see. It's pretty horrible, actually. It's quite. I remember watching the X Files years ago, where it had a guy that kept being abducted by Grace, and he was like really, really scared. And I remember watching it and thinking, oh God, what a creep! How pathetic! I'd love it if I was abducted by Grace. Oh, it'd be so fascinating. I'd just be interested, and I'd write about it. Why is he so scared? But having had the experience, it's no fun because you don't have control. You
Right.
can't sort of have it and then sort of say, "Oh, I'm going to go back now." They've got you, and you're very like awake, but you're not in your body, and they can like do what they want, like fiddle with you and all sorts of stuff. I mean, mostly they looked in my mouth at my teeth and had my mouth really like stretched really kind of up, and I don't know why that was, but it's a horrible experience. And for 3 or 4 nights it went on, and literally when I put my head down to go to sleep, when my body was tired, all of a sudden my consciousness would get ripped away from my body, and I'd find myself in a room, and it was horrific. And I thought, and I spoke to somebody at that time, I think Lorien Fenton, and I said, I'm really, really scared. And she said, there are people out there that every single night they try to sleep, but they just get taken. And she says it's called the slots, and they go to the slots every night. And honestly, I was absolutely terrified, and I had to go to someone for help. And they made me go through all these rituals and go to sleep with what was it, that black stuff? I think it's is it orgonite or something like that, or some black crystal, to hold it in my left hand. And I had to kind of get all the tech out of the room and say some chanting before I went to sleep. I'm in control. I'm in control. Nobody has control of me, and all kind of stuff. And eventually, I had a night's sleep where my consciousness was back in my body, and I wasn't taken out. And I thought, right, okay, I'm okay. It's not going to keep happening to me. But it was absolutely terrifying. So these beings are intradimensional. So they're not as if they come from a different planet. They come from a different dimension, a higher one than us. So we're like little guinea pigs who've only got this dimension, and we're like in our little cages thinking, oh, this is all there is. But they're like the humans walking around. They've got access to the whole lot. So they can do what they like of us, basically, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So you know what's interesting is, well, first of all, it's pretty funny to talk to a person from England, because when we talk about abductions, we just call it an abduction. When I talk to someone from England, you're saying, "Oh, it's a proper abduction." I love the way you guys call stuff proper, and it's hilarious. I love that. So you initially you weren't scared about being abducted. You said that someone was abducted, but I know why, because they weren't properly abducted. So not to make a joke out of it, but so the interesting thing is also you said that you were, when I talk to some people and they say that they were abducted, until they go to a hypnotist, they don't really know that. But you were conscious during all of this. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's conscious, but then I'm
Wow.
a psychic, so I suppose I'm lucky in that when I go to the astral, maybe in sleep, I remember it, and then I've taken since I stopped being a journalist, and I do psychic readings for other people, so I would like literally sit opposite somebody and go psychically and get people that passed away and come through me and sort of, well, they don't come through, they come to me, and then I kind of recount messages. And I've only done that for maybe about a year, and I'm not sure I like doing it. I mean, I am a Catholic. It doesn't sit very well with me, but I started to do it, because I started getting more and more psychic lately. But with those beings, I always thought that it was a physical thing, and it was only when I started talking to other people, and they're like, no, 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 nobody has it physically. For other people, it's like in the lucid dream state, as they call it, and it's out of their body. So these greys, they don't take the body, they leave the body behind, and they just take the astral body. They take that body out. So literally, they can access us in our dream life. They can sort of hack in, which makes them pretty scary, really.
Is there any way to resist this ability that these interdimensional beings are trying to grab not only our consciousness, our subconsciousness, and I believe you mentioned sometimes abducting a body, a physical body in a form of a body. Is there any protection that we have against them, or not at all? We're just completely vulnerable?
Yeah, no, I found the same protection as I use with Bianchi is prayer. And also Jesus, the name Jesus. I mean, when I was abducted by Aquino, he's linked with the Greys somehow, and I don't really understand in what way. But when he pulled me out of my body, when I tried to interview him, he showed me something which is a kind of a shape within a shape within a shape, and he said, if you climb into that, then you can time travel, and you can go wherever you want, and you can go inside the minds of anybody throughout history that you choose to. And I said, well, I don't want to do something like that. What about Jesus? And as soon as I said Jesus, I found myself slapped back down in my body. So I learned that when you are with them, if you can get conscious enough to say, I call on Jesus Christ, I call on Jesus Christ, the power of Jesus Christ, you let me go, or something like that, then that is our only defense, which is really weird. And then also, if they come at you or attack you or try and abduct you in your dream state, you can, it's called pleading down the blood of Christ. You can imagine them being covered in blood and the blood of Jesus Christ, and it kind of makes them dissipate as well. So we've got kind of that blood of Christ thing. I know it sounds gory, but it does tend to work. If you're in the midst of really bad attack, it does work.
Yeah, hold on. I think we might have a caller here. Hi, this is Dave. Can you speak up? I'd love to talk to you.
Hi, this is Ariana.
Oh, Ariana. Hey, how are you? You're talking to our guest, Christine. How are you?
Good today. Now, I got in a little late, so maybe she can, or you can tell me. She's a journalist and a medium, and does she write about aliens, or does she just have experiences with aliens?
Okay, Christina, hopefully you heard the caller, right? I'm sure you did.
Yeah, no, I've started to no, actually, well, I don't write about them. The English don't like that kind of thing, so if I was to write about them, I'd be flogging a dead horse because we don't believe in them here. So it's like, unless I was to write a novel, something like X-Files, it would be maybe publishable. But if I was to write about my experiences, I would just get turned away. So, I mean...
Really? So in other words, so the people in the UK, they're more hesitant to talk about aliens and UFOs, which could mean that there's still the same amount of quantity of abductions, UFO sightings, etc. But is it being like buried, hidden, not talked about for any particular reason?
Yeah, England is very straight, and it's sort of. I suppose it's an atheist country, really, and so it's like even if you talk about God, you get sort of raised eyebrows. It's all about house prices and dinner parties, and it's not really a nice place actually. I mean, I find it quite mentally constrictive. I mean, I lived in LA for a while, and the people there were much more open-minded, whereas people in England, it's almost like a tiny, tiny village where everybody sort of thinks, oh, well, you don't believe in that, you're crazy. And so you start thinking, oh, no, okay, I don't, I'll keep quiet. And it's a little bit like that, actually, in England, I find.
Well, let me ask you one question. I don't want to see if Ariana has another follow-up question, but I'm interested in this because you mentioned in the UK there's a lot of atheists there. Now, I know that some people in the United States say that, well, not just the United States, the world's the world's hiding about UFOs to the general public, some people say, is because the religious crash of identifying that there's aliens and not a god that has been infecting the human race for thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years. They think that there will be a complete destruction of society and a chaos if we acknowledge aliens because of the religious crash that'll come from it. Now, you're saying in the UK, with all the atheists there, it would seem like you would be more interested and more open towards aliens than the United States is, because it seems like if you're saying there's more atheists in the UK, the United States seems to be heavily a religious country. So I'm surprised
Yeah,
you would say
it's
that.
nicer there, isn't it? You've got the Bible well, and it's a protection against these beings, whatever they are. I don't think they mean humanity very well, and I think probably at the upper levels, the controllers of this place are probably taken over by them. They're probably hybrids, and the world gets darker and darker and darker, and people say it's getting better, but it's not getting better. It's getting more ugly and more competitive, certainly in this country. And I think, I don't know, I don't think people would mind it if, they said about UFOs here. I don't think they would pay much attention to it, really. It's all about money, and people, all they care about here is the national health system and house prices and pensions, and that's all people care about here. They don't even look to spirituality anymore here. It's like it's such a dead zone. I mean, it's bad. It's like John Cleese said it to Jamie Lee Curtis in A Fish Called Wanda. He said people here, when they get to 30, they just die. And it's true, really. It's true of England. It's sad that we've become like this, If you're not money-minded and money is your god from an early age, then you're in trouble. You will get pushed under because it's very expensive to live here. I mean, but you have to be obsessed with the financial system.
Wow. So let me ask you this question, and then we will get to Ariana. Thanks for sticking on the line. I'm curious about. I would think that people in the UK and people in the United States would be a lot more freaked out if they knew the degree of mind control of these interdimensional beings controlling the minds of humanity and taking the bodies. And I would think that that'd be more frightening than the religious fears. I would think that the loss of humanity based upon the mind control and the abductions is far more fearful to me personally.
Yeah, I mean, I do think we have a God, and I think we have to make a conscious connection to God. I mean, I've started reading the Old Testament, Isaiah, and really feeling God. I feel a connection to Yahweh. I've started praying the Psalms, and I've started really hunting down God and really making a conscious connection, because I do think we're infested by these beings, whatever they are, maybe they're fallen angels, I mean, who knows, but we're kind of more or less being taken over by them, and it's just getting worse and worse. And I think we can find ourselves choosing sides, like, are you going to not give to that person begging? Are you going to sort of spend on yourself? And it gets more and more like our souls have this big sort of thing. Are we going to sort of carry on getting reincarnated into a dark world and just get our souls eaten up? Or are we going to, really make a difference and do some really good things in life and really connect to God and pray more and really make a sort of difference and do good things and serve others and help people? And I think in that way we can escape this kind of ink blot of a planet and, get off it and get somewhere that's more light and hasn't been infested by whatever we've been infested by.
Okay, as Ariana, you're still on the line. I'm sure you have another follow-up question because you've been on the line patiently with us. So a follow-up from you.
Well, she had said that that people don't really like to talk about the aliens and abductions and things where she lives in, but yet there's an open. From what I've seen on TV, there are so many shows about ghosts. They accept ghosts, but they won't accept aliens.
Yeah, there is a lot of ghost things on the TV here. I think that's not many people believe in ghosts, though. It's kind of seen as a joke. So those kind of programs are like, oh, look, people believing in ghosts and how silly. They're seen as a joke. They're not taken seriously at all.
Wow. By the way, we had one more caller that called in, and I did not connect them. So if you want to call again, I'll connect you in with Ariana and our guest Christine. So, Ariana, any more questions? Do you have a follow up on that one?
No, if she's talking about aliens on Thursdays, I'll call, and if she's interested in hearing any of my experiences or anything like that.
Okay, yeah, unfortunately, Christine is in the UK, so it's like a big time difference, so it's kind of tough for her to join during my usual Thursday broadcast. But I did invite her, and hopefully she can join periodically. So thanks, Ariziana. I always appreciate your calling in. Thanks so much.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, I'm curious about this, Christine. Okay, so she did hang up. So I'm curious about this. You mentioned, let's see, I had this. Oh, you mentioned the communication capabilities, where I said, is there a way for us to not be controlled by these interdimensional beings? And you said if you bring religion to it, you can kind of break away from that. But, we have another caller. Let me bring them in and then I'll ask my question. Hello, this is Dave Darren. Can I take your name, please?
Yeah, I was just wondering, why do some aliens harm animals? Like, for instance, cattle mutilations, nailing squirrels to trees, those kinds of things.
Pardon?
Christine, did you have any comment on that? The caller said, "Why do some aliens they abuse animals and things like that?" I don't know if you really know that answer. In fact, I don't because I don't have
Well, I
much.
think they mutilate cattle and other animals. I think they drink the blood. I think they need blood from the lower densities. So, and I think the fear of the animals. So it's the same as they do to us, who they see as like farm animals as well. So it's the same thing to get the fear, to get the blood.
Okay. There's your answer. Any follow up question? Maybe not. Okay, so thanks for the caller for calling in. We answered his question. I was going to get to my question was the controlling of minds. Now, can we use that to our advantage to try to open up a communication? We see all these science fiction shows like Star Trek and things like that where we try to peacefully communicate with brand new life forms, first contact. Can we use the mind control that they have abducted our minds to the advantage that we can understand them more thoroughly? Can there be a back and forth conversation to really understand what they're trying to do with us, why they're controlling our minds, why they're abducting our bodies? Can we use it to our advantage to open up dialogue with these beings that we don't fully understand?
Well, I think they've already got control of us. I think it's gone too far. And I think because we're in the position of being like farm animals, it's a bit like, having farm animals. If they all of a sudden went to the farmer and said, "What are you doing with us? What are your plans for us? You're not going to eat us, are you? You're not going to sell us. You're not breeding us for certain reasons, are you?" It's kind of at that point where I don't think we'll get an honest answer. And sadly, our capabilities, even though some of us are psychic, whatever, our abilities aren't as high as theirs. They're out of the third density. They're seeing us from higher levels. So we're in the time-space constriction. So they can see us almost like a tube. So they can see the beginning of time, the end of time, and we're like in a tube going from the beginning to the end. So they can see the whole thing, and it's like as if my gerbil would start speaking to me. I might think it was sweet, but I wouldn't really take it seriously.
Yeah, but surely we progressed a bit. If we watch TV programs in the United States, we have this program called Ancient Aliens. I don't know if you have that broadcast in the UK or not, but they talk about beings. Now, usually they talk about ancient aliens, so it's aliens from off-world, off-Earth. But 300,000 years ago, etc. Surely we progressed a lot since that time frame till now. So we should not really be animals to them because we have progressed a mentality where we can construct a variety of things to help out the human race with the mechanical, electrical devices. We've progressed quite a bit. So now, of course, they've progressed as well as we progress. Of course, they're also progressing as well. So we're still a huge difference away from where they are. But we should not really be considered the minimal suspects to them. We progressed to a bit where we have some intelligence and some abilities which we didn't have a long time ago. So why are we still so inferior to them where we're just animals or insects to their perspective?
I suppose, if you read in the Book of Enoch, etc., and you read about, these beings, I mean, let's say perhaps they're fallen angels, cast down, and, they have things like 360 wings, they have, these amazing, consciousnesses. I mean, they're just more powerful, aren't they? So we're quite constricted, aren't we? We're stuck in flesh and bone, and even though we're quite clever, we're not.
Yep.
We're not sort of. Even though you get someone, these occultists, there's black magicians who have, like Kino, for instance, that can do the time traveling and the consciousness, and with their consciousness, they're still really just playing in puddles compared to these beings who actually don't like us. I mean, they hate humanity. If you think about it, there was a whole argument with God because they didn't, these angels didn't like it that they had to, serve us. And then there was the whole battle in heaven, and they were cast down. I mean, they were really cast down because of us, really. And I think they actually hate us. So it's like beings that are more than us, that actually hate us and that can inhabit us if they want. I mean, I know there's some people that try and communicate with them, but I think also that's dangerous as well because you can be taken over, I suppose, at any time. I mean, also I think fighting them, sometimes when you hear about people fighting them and they say, "Oh, I'm going to expose them," and I know Stephen Greer tries to speak to them, and he has a little phone app now that he's given out to people to try and communicate with them. But sometimes I think these people that are encouraging that we talk to them are actually sort of on side with them, that are actually really just kind of hooked up to them, that they're just kind of used, because I think it's a dangerous thing to do that. And I think we've just got we've just got the defense, like Jesus came to save us and he shed his blood. And, if you read the Bible, it says, "I am the gate." And so he is the gate for the sheep to go through. He spoke to us and called us sheep, basically, so that's a hint. And he said, "I am the gate." So really, all we've got is prayer, really, and to humble ourselves and to know that we are just sheep, and to humble ourselves and ask for protection and follow the way of living in that way and not pumping up our egos and thinking that we are as powerful as the angels, because we're really not as powerful as the angels, not at all, in fact.
Okay, we have another caller now. Let me bring them in. Caller, identify yourself, please. And you're talking to Christine and Dave here on the show.
Hi, Dave and Christine. This is Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff. Hey, how are you?
Hello.
Hey, pretty good. I had a question for Christine. Does she know of any resistance and any kind of group that is trying to resist actively this alien/MK Ultra control that's coming over the world? And if so, does she have any information on how people can join it and get involved?
Well, I kind of followed James Casbolt and Max Spears into, Bases is run by Miles Johnson, but then it's weird, when I got involved with them, then I found myself being sort of, attacked by various people, linked with them, and various truthers who were speaking out the truth as they saw it, and, spiritual gurus. And so I think looking at it, that these groups, and there are many of them, have been very, very infiltrated, and they've been infiltrated by people that are actually hooked up to these beings, and basically then lead people in the wrong direction and say, right, I'm a leader of this group, I'm a spokesperson, I'm going to give you truth. But then they lead people down a bad pathway. And I think you can easily recognize them by they, come out with stuff like, we are the gods, and as soon as you hear that, then you know that they're just leading you. So sadly, there are groups, but also they've been really heavily infiltrated. And it's probably okay to go along and just hang out with the people there, and you do certainly make friends, which is a really, really good thing. But don't get into following this one or following that one or this one. Because if you start doing that, then you're going to be in trouble, because there's a lot of infiltration there. And there's a lot of, will just try and be after your soul, really, and to lead you in a wrong direction, meaning that they're dangerous places for the non-discerning.
So now, just to clarify for Jeff, since he wanted to know exactly who to contact, was it a Miles Johnson? What were they? Give me those key points again.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, I have a Facebook, Christine Hart, on Facebook. You can join me there. But yeah, I mean, Basis Group. It's on YouTube. It's called the Basis Project, and there's a lot of people that give testimonies. I gave a lecture there over Skype a few weeks ago. They're a sort of group, and they're a Facebook group as well. You know, you can find. Uh, so yeah, I mean, but be discerning and don't follow. A lot of people are putting themselves as gurus and saying what's going on, but I mean that's pretty bad.
Yeah, okay. Well, one thing that's a little bit frightening is you're talking about these intradimensional beings and you're talking about them hating humanity and having control of our minds and potentially abducting our bodies. I don't see really any hope of us controlling them or keeping enough away from us. And you did say religion can help us to that degree. But for instance, humans, just human versus human. Once we have control of them and once we have a hatred of another country, we don't typically want to surrender the power that we have over them. So I'm imagining intradimensional beings or aliens or whatever you believe, if they have control of our minds and they hate us, we're kind of in a situation where we're really kind of at their mercy, right? It's a tough battle to have.
Yeah, I think it is a tough battle. And when I first started waking up to it, I remember meeting up with somebody and they spoke to me about it. And I started to think, well, that's a bit too much to take. It's rather like waking up to find you're Jewish in a big Nazi castle. And, it's so it's kind of quite horrible. And then the more you wake up, the more you kind of see, and the more you kind of see that they've got control over a lot of systems, like the school system, that's definitely controlled by them. And I used to hear people saying it and think, oh, no, they haven't, no, they haven't. But then when you kind of see it, certainly close up, because I have a child, then you see, they have them reading these demonic books, and, it's a kind of cold system, certainly in the UK, the schools. And so you kind of witness that they do have a tight control on the place. But then you do read, like the words of Jesus to say, have comfort and to cling close to him, and he talks about evil and that it's all around us and this being Satan's kingdom. And so then you kind of see it and you feel freed up in a way. You feel like, because we are here temporarily after all, and you kind of feel freed up and you start to look forward to eternal life, and you start to think, right, what can I do to build up treasures for myself in the other life? And then you start helping other people, and the more you start helping other people, the more you feel like your soul is becoming more light than more dark. Your ego is kind of sloughing off, and the more you do that, I think they have a lesser control over you. It's almost like you kind of feel the bondage slipping away, and that's their bondage because they're low frequency, low everything. So if you find yourself like listening to that 432 hertz music at night and just feeling love in your heart and crying just for the sake of crying, you kind of are more connecting to the other energy, and you're kind of raising yourself higher and out of their grip, really. I suppose that's their weak point, isn't it? That they are connected to God and we are. We've just lost our connection. We're like Christmas trees with no lights on, or Christmas trees we haven't been plugged in, and so if we start plugging ourselves in and lighting ourselves up, then we become strong and strong and strong. And I think the more you become strong and strong, the more you look around at the world and you do see how bad it is, and you do see, hang on, this isn't a good place.
Yeah, and maybe another power that we have as humans is we're somewhat flexible and we're somewhat capable as we're being taught and sometimes manipulated and controlled by these interdimensional beings. Maybe our perspective, maybe we'll become, you as a teacher, sometimes a student can become more knowledgeable than the teacher. So maybe we do have the capability at some point of turning it around. We see movies like Scanners from the 80s, that movie from a long time ago. And I remember that the one being actually became more powerful, and he was able to take over the being that was the aggressor and become that being. I remember that movie. It was a frightening movie. Heads were exploding and all that. But there is a possibility that humanity could actually start learning and picking up the capabilities that these interdimensional beings have and start to turn it around into us being the ones that become more powerful than the teachers. Maybe that's a possibility. Maybe sort of far-fetched, but
Don't you think, David, that really it's probably, rather than us arm wrestling with them, isn't it best to just say to God, we want to come back home to you, rather than trying to get power here? Do you know what I mean? I don't think we were meant to get power here, were we? I don't, because Jesus could have said that in the Sanhedrin, I'm going to zap you all and show who's more powerful. But he went and let himself be crucified. So I think that's a message, that we should make ourselves, humble, that we don't want to arm wrestle. Then they can, crack on, really. We just want to go home, don't we?
Yeah, well, there is a problem. Is not everyone in the entire world or the entire United States has a belief in God or religion. So the people that don't are kind of more toxically. They're not able to fight back to that degree if that's the way we can fight back. But then maybe it's something.
But then don't you think, David, that they will probably get seduced then? Like they'll probably there's a weakness in them that they will probably be seduced. They'll be offered power. They'll be offered psychic gifts. Maybe they'll be offered power in life, and all of a sudden they'll be like, okay, this place is a good place. So it's like.
Maybe
who needs God?
Maybe
who needs God when I'm feeling powerful? You know?
Yeah, maybe that's the day of it's the day of the end of the world. Is at that point maybe the day of battle between good and evil, right? Could be. The people. Seduced,
I think we call out to God, don't we, when we're in our worst situation? I mean, I was made homeless a couple of months ago, and somebody saved me, helped me, gave me somewhere to live. But when I was really, facing living on the street, I was on my knees calling out to God every single day. And I got this connection, and then God lifted me up and helped me. And that was the best experience of my life. It was better than being published. It was better than going on the BBC. It was better than being a national newspaper judge. It was better than anything, because it was like I knew then that I had a father that was really, really powerful and that could save me. I just had to say, I want you to help me here,
Wow. I'd love to be on the BBC because I would love to meet John Cleese. You mentioned him before. I think that's a tremendous actor and comedian. I love John Cleese.
He's lovely, he's lovely.
Yeah, in fact, I use him for my opening. In fact, I use his funny walk. So I think John Cleese is hysterical. I love Faulty Towers and everything. I like science fiction. I like English comedy. I love English comedy. It's tremendous. English comedy is interesting because I lived in Japan for a while. My wife's Japanese. And it's funny when she watches English comedy, especially a longer time ago with the Monty Python and with things like that, it was more visual comedy, whereas United States is a lot of witty comedy. Like if you watch Cheers or things like that, where you have to understand the dialogue more than the actions. It's comedy. American comedy is a lot tougher to grasp when your English language is not fully grasped. Whereas English, you can watch it because actually Japanese comedy is more action-based more than it is the witty conversation. So it's interesting. So, Christine, you were a great guest to come on. By the way, you used to be a broadcaster. Since we had this dialogue, obviously you're very good at broadcasting. And are you interested in broadcasting again? Are you going to start up a podcast show at some point? Are you going to get into this again?
Yeah, no, I had my show with Revolution Radio, and I stopped it, and then I've taken it up again. So my YouTube what is my YouTube? I think it's called Christine Joanna Hart, and my website is www.christinejoannahart, and my YouTube is Christine Joanna Hart. So yeah, you can go to my YouTube and join it, and I do radio shows once a week.
Oh, okay, cool. That's pretty cool. I do shows once a week too. Obviously, you're on a different time than me because you're UK based. So so we're not competing with each other, which is good also, right?
Yeah, I'm doing a series on magic right now. So I'm studying magic just because I find it quite interesting. And when you get in that truth movement, like that guy was saying, you get hit with all kinds of black magic, like Max Spears complained about that as well. So you kind of have to start learning about ways to protect yourself, I mean, so I'm just studying these various different things, not to get any kind of power, but just you learn certain things from these people that have studied it, and even the act of burning white sage and just like really getting that smoke going and putting it over your chakra points. I mean, you can feel really cleaned off after doing that. It's amazing.
Yeah, wow. Well, Christine, again, it was great having you on, and I'm glad you announced the broadcast that you do so some people can watch you. And it was great having you on the show because we love English accents. And you said you guys in the UK, you love American accents, right?
Yes, it's been fun speaking
So,
to you because, I love Americans.
So you know what that means? That means I should be a guest on your show because
I've
got a New York City, Philadelphia accent. You need me on your show.
I do. You'll have to come on. You'll like my co-host Edward. He's funny. He's got a Yorkshire talks like that, Yorkshire.
Okay, yeah, cool. So maybe I'd like to have him on the show too, on my show. So announce me to him, and maybe he'll come on my show. Maybe you guys can come on back to back, side to side. We can do a show like that. That'd be fun, right? So it was great having you on the show. Thanks so much. We just talked to Christine, who is a medium, and we talked a lot about UFOs, paranormal, and she's also a broadcaster. Make sure you check out her show as well. So thanks again for being on the show, and you'll come on again. We'll have you back on if you don't mind.
Oh no, I'd really love that, and thank you, David. Thank you. I'm going to have my cocoa now and go to bed.
Okay, yeah. Have a great night, and thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you, everyone that spoke to me as well. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, cool. Bye-bye. Okay, so that's all we got right now. You see that the screen turned black because Christine hung up and we're on Skype. So in other words, in order to put me back on in visuals, I've got to launch another piece of program. So I'll do that so I can say goodbye to you guys appropriately instead of seeing the screen of all of my little icons here, all my folders. So hang on while I pull myself up so you can see me again. Hang on for a second. Should come up. I should have had this up in the back. Okay, so you can see me now. And thanks, guys, for joining the show, asking some questions. You guys had some really good questions today. Thanks for the callers that called in, Ariziana, Jeff, etc. Thanks for calling in and talking to my guest. And that's all I've got for today. We'll see you on Thursday. Thursday, we're going to talk again about the paranormal UFO topics. And don't forget, a week from this Thursday, we're going to talk about control. We talked a little bit about control as well on this show. So we're going to try to see if we have the ability to control any aspects of our mind projected towards others, or we're going to experiment with that. I don't know if we can do it live on the show because obviously it takes a lot of concentration. That's all I got for today, guys, and let me see if I can end the show with my brand new closing and opening theme song. So here we go, guys. Thanks a lot for joining the show. I'll see you guys on Thursday, okay? Ciao.
Do you know the Dave Darren Show?
Hot enough to boil a monkey's bum.
Who the fuck is Dave Darren?
Who the fuck is Dave Darren?
Are you a puff duck?
He used to be on terrestrial radio, but he got fired.
It's over. Don't you think it's over?
Spit.
Who the fuck is Dave Darren?
Here comes the boss fella now.
Dave Darren.